So,
Welcome everybody to Advanced Sleight of Mouth with Robert Dilts. What my partner, true love, is joining us here. Oksana, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
We've been looking forward to this for a long time, Robert. I know this is going to be something really special.
yes, thank you, and thank you for making this opportunity, for opening this space and giving such great support. And I also want to thank Andre, our technical, and our other technical group, for being able to make this possible. I'm really looking forward to this masterclass because I think it's really a time in the world when this is really needed. And it's one of the reasons that we decided to do this to begin with, is that it seemed like, for me, it seemed like this is probably one of the main contributions that I can make to help make our world better right now, which it certainly needs. In fact, I'm going to begin, before I start going into the presentation about the Advanced Sleight of Mouth, I want to begin with a reading. I often like to start with a poem or a reading. And this is one of my favorites. It's from a woman who's a kind of a spiritual teacher named Marianne Williamson, but she also has been a candidate for, she's been a presidential candidate in the last couple of elections. And interestingly, this quote was reportedly read by Nelson Mandela when he became president of South Africa. So for me, there's an interesting history here. The title is about our deepest fear. And she says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Well, actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, or you're a child of a universe. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people don't feel it's secure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to manifest the glory of God or the universe that is within us. And it's not in some of us, it's in everyone. So as we make our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. And as we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And one of the things that I really like about this quote is that there's a lot of belief in it. It's essentially a belief statement. And the interesting question, of course, is what is the consequence of believing that or not? And I think that's a lot of what Advanced Sleight of Mouth is about. This idea that we have these beliefs, and those beliefs begin to form a system that are going to determine the way in which we, act, the way in which we respond to what's going on. So I want to be going into what is Advanced Sleight of Mouth? What will we be doing in Advanced Sleight of Mouth? And again, this is a master class, so that I'm also going to be giving some really important and interesting and hopefully valuable ideas and lessons for you. So the way we're going to do this, by the way, is that I'll do some presentation, and then we like to have time for questions at the end. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you may want to put your questions in the chat there, and we will be kind of looking through and going over some of these questions, answering some of them when we get to the end of the masterclass this evening, today, depending upon your time zone tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and get started with the sort of class portion here. And to do that, I am going to share my slides. There we are. So, there's 2 volumes of Sleight of Mouth, and sort of the basic Sleight of Mouth program essentially is working from the first volume, kind of going over what are these patterns, what are some fundamental ways that we can, apply those patterns what are some strategies for working with beliefs, for example, and how you can fit sleight of mouth into that. This program we're going to actually be looking at strategies of using combinations of these patterns for specific purposes. So I'll go over that in just a moment. And this is going to be drawn more from the second volume of Sleight of Mouth, which is all about this idea of how words can change worlds. Now, of course, we'll be kind of using both things from both of these volumes, which were written actually almost exactly 25 years apart. So it's kind of an interesting completion of a cycle. Now, just to do a quick bit of review, again, this is about putting these patterns of conversational belief change into practice. So the assumption here will be that those who are coming to the program are already going to know these patterns or know about them. And the question is, how do we put them into practice? And as you'll see, some of the images there on the left side of the slide are, we'll see, are some of the models that are an inspiration for this. Here, of course, are these 14 different sleight of mouth patterns that the question is, okay, if I use these in certain kinds of combinations, you're going to get certain kinds of results. So what kind of results, might we get if we combine these in a certain way? And if I want to achieve a certain result, what might be the best combination to do that? So now, once again, what is sleight of mouth? Sleight of mouth, the implication is that it's about the magic of language. Sleight of mouth is a play on the term sleight of hand, in which, again, in sleight of hand, I can turn, I can pull a rabbit out of a hat. I can turn, one card into another card. I can seemingly saw somebody in half and then put them back together. These are all examples of this. And a lot of it is about creating a kind of an illusion. Now, the interesting thing is, obviously, through our language, we create different kinds of illusions. But some of these illusions are visions of possibilities. It was interesting. I was just reading a very interesting quote today by the inventor Nikola Tesla that he wrote almost 100 years ago, when he was talking about what he was calling wireless transmission. And in those days, that was completely crazy. It would be illusory. And he said, when we fully are able to fully express this wireless, this wireless possibility, he said the world will be like a brain. People will be able to have something simple in their hand, and they'll be able to talk to somebody even though they're 1,000 miles away, and that person will get it immediately. Now, back in 1924 or 25, that was, insanity, right? That was crazy. Today, that's our world. I mean, that's what many of us are doing right now. We're living this thing that Tesla, was an illusion back then. So this is kind of this interesting idea of how do we create these worlds, change worlds through words. Now, of course, this is where those patterns come in. And now these patterns are particular language patterns that are specifically directed at a level of belief. And I'm sure for those of you who have certainly been through the beginning Sleight of Mouth program or know much about any of the sort of work I do, you'd be familiar with this pyramid of different levels. So we have an environmental level, which is about our concrete world around us. We have our behavioral level, which is about what we do with our physical body. We have our capability level, which is how we learn things, how we are able to, create mental models. And then we have our beliefs. And the power of belief is that it's, as I was kind of saying about this example of Tesla, it's about how we, how we use and what we imagine and what we are able to, in a sense, create and reinforce about our world. Then, of course, we have this level of our identity, which is, who am I that if I have this belief, if I live this belief, it's going to have an impact on who I am as an individual, as a person. And then there's this level of purpose. That what am I here for? Now, of course, the interesting thing about beliefs is that even though beliefs are at a certain level here, we say that beliefs are about why we do things, not so much about how or what or where or when, but why. But also that also influences who I am and for what, what sort of purpose or sense of purpose I have. But a belief itself, of course, can be about any of these levels. I can have a belief about the environment. Say, will it rain tomorrow? Is it going to be sunny tomorrow? What's the temperature tomorrow? I can have a belief about it, that it will be a certain kind of weather. I can have a belief about behavior. Well, will I finish this job in time? Will I be able to do something? I can have a belief about the capability level. Can I master this competence? Will I be able to learn sleight of mouth or whatever? And then, of course, I can even have beliefs about beliefs. Is it more important to believe this? Is it more important to believe that? And then you begin to get to, as you get to these higher levels, you begin to get to what I would call something like an epistemological belief, which means they are the beliefs that are going to determine a lot about how I build the whole rest of this pyramid, the whole rest of my model of the world. And so these, again, these are of a different order than, is it going to rain tomorrow? I believe it's going to rain or not going to rain. These are beliefs that we could hear in that reading from Marianne Williamson. Am I inadequate? Am I powerful beyond measure? Am I playing small? And if I play small, what happens? And if I don't play small, what happens? If I'm free from my fear, what happens? Those would be on a very different order than, whether I can complete this job or something. On the other hand, these will influence that. And a very interesting example, we have a friend of mine is turned 75 and is struggling financially, and is wondering what they should do. They can't get a loan on their house, etc. And now, again, if you start to build this belief, I'm not adequate, I'm no good, I'm not good enough, that is going to determine a lot about where you go in that situation. If I believe that, I am adequate, if I believe that I deserve things, if I believe that I am, again, a light in the world, I'm going to have a whole different way of approaching that. Another interesting example, my wife's mother is getting very elderly and fell recently and fractured her pelvis, and becomes very interesting now what sort of belief you have about that. Is this the beginning of the end? If you have that belief, it's going to start to shape a lot about how you think, what you do, how you set up an environment. If I have a different belief, if I have a belief that, well, who knows what's possible, that this health is so normal, it can come back, you'll have a whole other approach. So this is the power of beliefs, as it says here. Of course, they're generalizations at this especially these, what I'm calling these epistemological beliefs. They're generalization about cause, about meaning, about limits in the world around us, in our capabilities, and our identities. So again, they have not only an important influence on what we do consciously, but also on what we do unconsciously. And I think that's another one of these big powers of beliefs. They become what is called self-fulfilling. So I just want to kind of that's background that I imagine that many of you know. But to me, this is where the whole notion of applying sleight of mouth comes in. We are going to be encountering significant life situations where our belief is going to determine what happens and which direction something goes. And that's a big part of what this program is about. So now, again, this is just a little bit of review, so the kinds of places where these patterns have come from then are many different parts of our realities. Certainly politics is a huge area of sleight of mouth, and politics in today's world. This is a time where there's a lot of political activity going on, a lot of sleight of mouth, which can be, again, sleight of mouth can be positive and effective. It can help to open possibilities. Sleight of mouth can also be used defensively. It can be used negatively. It can be used to put somebody else down. Same thing, you have there's in religion, there's a lot of beliefs and belief systems. That's why sleight of mouth has an important role there. In philosophy, in law, psychotherapy, healing, media, literature. So these are places where beliefs tend to be transmitted in many different ways, and also not only transmitted, but put into practice. And you'll see here that we see some of the kinds of role models, people that I spent a lot of time over the past 25 years, actually before that, because I started developing sleight of mouth over 15 years before I wrote the first book. So sleight of mouth is about, I think we were having the 40th anniversary recently. Anyway, you see there's people like Ghandi, like Martin Luther King Jr., like Lincoln, Socrates, Jesus, Milton Erickson, Shakespeare, but also people like Richard Bandler, Oprah Winfrey, writers like Mark Twain, leaders like Eisenhower. How these people use the language in order to create the leverage to make changes in the world in their area. So, and again, the idea here is it's not simply about one pattern or another pattern. It's about combinations. It's about strategies for using these patterns. So in fact, how our sleight of mouth patterns tend to be used: confirm or reinforce a belief, or introduce doubt about a belief, to sway opinions through belief, to incite actions from beliefs, to create or challenge generalizations, or examine them, we can say, build or protect a particular belief or belief system. Those are a lot of the typical uses of sleight of mouth. And again, so as we think about a sleight of mouth, for those of you, again, who are at the foundational sleight of mouth program, we went over, there's certain principles of sleight of mouth. Principles like energy follows attention. We say in NLP, energy flows where your attention goes. If I put my attention on the weather, my energy goes to the weather. If I put my attention on my work, my energy goes to my work. If I put my attention on my family, my energy goes to my family. And then language directs attention. So thus it also is directing energy. And again, here's where we sometimes talk about the paradox of negation. If I say, don't put your attention on the weather, I'm actually bringing attention to the weather. So there's an interesting paradox there. But we could say then that language frames and reframes our perceptions and our experience of something. I can take the same exact, reality. As we say, words are kind of a map of reality. And I speak about that reality in one way, and it brings attention to certain things. If I speak about that same reality in another way, it's going to bring the energy and attention in a different place. And then this has to do with this notion of holons and holarchies. So I can bring my attention either to some part of a bigger whole, or to larger parts, to smaller parts. So this also determines the way in which I'm going to react, and also ultimately how successful I'm going to be. Now, then there's skills of using sleight of mouth. So, because one of the things that I think is clear about something like sleight of mouth is it can be used in a very positive way. It can be used again to create a really wonderful world. It can also be used to create horrors in a way. It can be used to create shame. It can be used to create rejection. So some of the skills are about creating resonance. So what we call, rapport, identifying what we would call thought viruses, which would be limiting beliefs, pacing and leading, putting yourself into the shoes of somebody else, what we call second position, developing emotional intelligence. That one key thing we, of course, will be continuing to use in this advanced program is that dynamic between what we call crash states and coach states. between a stuck, limited state and an open, empowered state of choice. And this idea of taking metaposition, of being able to reflect upon our beliefs. Many of our beliefs we built unconsciously, as for example, as a child. And the whole idea of a, quote, thought virus is, I didn't even build the belief myself. It was a belief that I took on from somebody else's belief. It's not even my own. I was told this. And then engaging multiple intelligences. Key, obviously sleight of mouth means it's primarily about language, but we want to be able to engage other intelligences, not just words and verbal intelligence, but our emotional intelligence, our visual intelligence, our social intelligence, etc. And then, of course, there are the patterns, and we need to master in some ways. That's the different patterns to be able to put them into practice. So now, the key here, what we're going to be focusing on in this masterclass, but also in the 4-day training, is this notion of sleight of mouth strategies. So we use sleight of mouth in order to do things like unpack belief statements, like so again, we might call it critical thinking. I have this belief. Do I choose to believe this? So let's take some of these beliefs that we might have from the Marianne Williamson. Maybe I think I'm inadequate because I'm not talented, or I'm not attractive. I'm inadequate because I'm not attractive, or I'm not financially secure, so I'm not adequate. I am not intelligent, so I'm inadequate. So I might want to reflect, well, is that true, right? Let's kind of examine whether that's that cause and that effect, or that equivalence is really valid. But you had some other beliefs. Playing small doesn't serve the world. Let me reflect on that. That's a belief. When we make our own light shine, we're unconsciously giving others permission to do the same. That's an interesting thing. Do I choose to live that? What does that mean? So that would be one, use. Also, challenging and transforming limiting beliefs. Like, well, let's say I want to challenge this belief that in myself, or helping somebody else if they think they're inadequate, and all of the, the consequences that brings in their life. Or flipping perceptions of that reality. I can say, this experience that happened to me is a terrible experience, or this experience is actually a really, wonderful experience, a learning experience. I gave the example, I believe, in one of my personal examples in my own life, is from when my mother had metastatic breast cancer, recurrence of metastatic breast cancer. And when she first got that, it was the worst thing that had ever happened in her life. And because she was able to shift her beliefs about things pretty dramatically, that actually brought a huge change in her life and her lifestyle. And she had a remarkable recovery. She switched to having a whole different kind of life. And then she would look back and say, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. So this is the interesting thing. There's a reality, but it's our perception of that reality is going to determine what it means to us. This notion, of course, we said beliefs are a lot about why. So through beliefs, you can inspire motivation, create confidence. Another thing is of course connecting to something beyond belief, or beliefs that connect us to something bigger than ourselves. That relates to kind of that top of that pyramid. And then through that, leveraging the power of purpose. So these are, now again, the idea is that in order to accomplish these things, I can't just use one pattern. I can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to find a counterexample and that's it. Well, I'm going to have to actually use a series of patterns. I'm going to need to use, a group of them in some way. So now, to help us do this, we have, this is something that we did go over in the basic program. This is actually from volume 2. It's not in volume 1, but for those of you who did attend the first program, these will be familiar. because we say these are red flags. If I have a belief and I'm wanting to say, is this belief possibly problematic? The interesting thing about belief is that you can't necessarily say a belief is true or not true, right? This belief I was sharing about Nikola Tesla saying, hey, when you can take wireless technology and actually, completely implement it, you're going to have this kind of a world. Well, that we can say, oh yeah, well that's true, but at that time you can't say it's true or not true. It could become true. You can make it true, or you can say that's ridiculous, and you can make it not true. So what do we choose to give our attention to? This is this whole idea, right, of energy follows attention. So is the belief bringing attention and our energy just to the problem and not to a solution or an outcome? Is it focusing on what to get rid of or what to avoid? Now, what's key about the idea of a red flag, it doesn't mean that the belief is wrong. It doesn't mean that it's bad. In fact, it could be a really important belief. But what it means is if it's only these things, all of your attention is just going to go there. And that's what will make it problematic. Does it create or promote separation or exclusion? Is it creating negative identity judgments? Is it presupposing negative intentions of others? Is it fostering either overinflation or deflation? Is it based primarily just on verbal logic? This because this, because this, because this. And so, if we take an example of one of these beliefs of I'm inadequate because, I'm not intelligent or I'm not attractive. Well, that's clearly focusing on a problem. It's kind of saying I'm something you've got to try to, go away from. It's creating exclusion. I'm different from others. There's a negative identity judgment. I'm inadequate. It's not necessarily presupposing a negative intention of somebody else. So that's one red flag that isn't there. But it certainly is either fostering some kind of deflation. And at least at this point, it's mostly words. So you would want to, again, part of the whole goal of sleight of mouth is to create this kind of enriching of a map of the world. And so one of the things that we do is we would say in these strategies, we're going to want to bring attention to an outcome. We're going to want to shift focus to what to go towards. We're going to want to kind of build a bridge to that. We're going to want to separate identity from behavior, saying, well, maybe it's not that you are inadequate. It's because you're not intelligent. Maybe you just haven't developed the strategies yet. Maybe it's not about you. It's about getting the right kind of feedback or the right kind of coaching. Well, maybe that's what it is. Again, seeking positive intention, connecting to something bigger, this idea of a larger whole, on engaging other senses and intelligences. So what we'll see in a couple of the examples I'll give, and in the program, these are one part of how we build that strategy. Now, another thing is based upon, and this is something we did not cover in the first program, is so-called Polya patterns of plausible inference. I'm not going to go into it a lot in this brief masterclass, just other than to say George Polya was actually a mathematician, but he was also very practical. He always was trying to think of practical uses for things. And one of the things that he said is like mathematics, if you're trying to prove a theorem, an example would be, oh, I have an equation that will generate prime numbers. Well, because there's an infinite number of numbers, you can never show, for sure, out to infinity, that's always true. At a certain point, you have to sort of take it for granted. And he would say the same thing is true in a lot of other places. For example, he used examples of the law, in a legal structure. How do I prove that somebody's guilty or innocent of some kind of crime? I was thinking of very very topical, interesting example. Just in the last week or so, there was the assassination attempt on the former President Trump. And I don't want to talk about that, but I remember one of the defining moments of my youth when I was 8 years old. President John Kennedy was assassinated. And there was a whole thing about, well, who assassinated him? And they arrested this guy, Lee Harvey Oswald. And, the question was, well, how do you know that he did it? Nobody saw him do it. There was shots fired, then they arrested this guy. And then, by the way, as a result of that, there was endless conspiracy theories, oh, the government actually did it, da, 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 da. So it was very interesting, this question of belief. And again, here's where belief can, determine, life or death in some ways. It can determine whether somebody is free or not free, etc. So these patterns then are things, there's be some examples of how do I think critically about a belief? So, what's the probability? So one interesting question is, we don't know for sure that Harvey Oswald did this, but what's the probability that he might have done it? And that comes from things like, if he did do it, what would be the consequence? What should you be able to see? Another interesting one is what you would call validation of contingencies. This would mean, for example, part of the reason that they arrested him is they said, we know that somebody saw him go into this building where the shots came from 35 minutes before the shots. Now, if he'd never gone into the building, you can't say that, you can't say he did it. There's no plausible reason that he could have done it. And then he left the building something like 3 minutes afterwards. That's suspicious. Why would he go in so early and then leave so quickly? They had a picture of him. They found in his room a picture of him holding a rifle. That's interesting. This rifle is the same kind of rifle that shot the bullets. So on and so forth. So these are not proofs, but the more of these things that you gather, the more you would say, this is plausible. Another example of these Polya patterns is inference from analogy. I show that, okay, let's take something else. Let's say it wasn't shooting somebody, but it was, going in and making bread or something, or going in and doing something. This must have to happen for this to happen, to this to happen, and I can show a parallel. Then it doesn't prove anything, but it adds, again, this idea of plausibility. If I can disprove the converse, if you can say, well, there's no way that he could have done it. The converse would be, he's absolutely innocent. There's no way that he could have done it. And I say, well, wait, actually, I'm not saying he did do it, but I can show that it's not true that he couldn't have done it. He could have done it. So these would be examples of this, and comparison with random. In that case, that's not such an obvious one. But let's take, if we take some examples of these Marianne Williamson things. I'm inadequate because I'm not intelligent. Well, what's what should be true of that? If I'm not intelligent, if that's true, then what would be a consequence of not being intelligent? What would be a consequence of being inadequate? Is that the case? What makes me not intelligent? In some ways, this idea of contingencies means it's my belief about what else has to be true in order for this belief to be true. In order for me to be unintelligent, then I must have had some kind of test that says that I'm not intelligent, or I must have some comparison that I'm making. So what's that comparison? Now, again, I don't want to go in. This is the kind of thing that we're going to go into in more detail. It's very fascinating. And it's also very, I find it very stimulating too, when we begin to take the beliefs that especially are relevant, personally relevant for us. Now, again, on the other side, we have these beliefs that playing small does not serve the world, and that if we're liberated from our fear, our presence liberates others. Well, if that's true, what's the consequence of that? That means that, if I am in this state, then what should I observe? What would be an analogy to that? So this becomes very interesting. These are saying, this is before we actually start saying, which pattern am I going to use? This is before I start saying, which of these sleight of mouth language patterns am I going to use? Now, the other thing we do that we introduce here, and I think this is also really powerful in terms of sleight of mouth. So you have sleight of mouth, you have the red flags, you have these patterns of inference. We also then weave in what we call patterns of genius. So patterns of genius are things like what all geniuses This comes from my study of strategies of genius that I've written 3 volumes, and I'm working on volume 4. Right now, my volume 4 is actually all geniuses that I had the opportunity to personally meet and interact with, people like Milton Erickson, Gregory Bateson, like Moshe Feldenkrais was a body somatic worker, Gabriel Roth, who developed a movement practice. So, but all the geniuses, you know, they have a highly developed use of imagination. They can envision something new and different. Strong orientation towards the future and belief in what's possible. I have Einstein is my example of using imagination, his thought experiments. Then there's Disney. Disney's the one who said, if you can dream it, you can do it. Gregory Bateson, I have for the metaphors and analogies. He said, everything is a metaphor for everything else. I was talking about Tesla earlier. Tesla used multiple intelligences and numerous links. So what part of Tesla's genius was he could visualize things that you can't see, right? Waves, you know, wireless waves. You can't see, you know, you can see the wires, but you don't see waves. So he could visualize them. He could turn them into sights and sounds and feelings. I have Leonardo da Vinci. It was about taking multiple perspectives. So we know da Vinci was a great inventor, and when he drew things from different points of view. He, in fact, said to understand anything, you need to see at least 3 different points of view. We have the ability to move back and forth between, you know, big chunks and small chunks. It's Mozart. Mozart could see the whole piece of music at once and then go down to a single note. Having a felt sense of connection and contribution to something beyond your individual identity. One of the things, as we'll see, I know somebody like Oprah Winfrey had this belief, by the way, that she said, you know, if you do what you love and you work hard and offer it in service to others, the universe will support you to succeed. And that's, I mean, first of all, that's a powerful belief. And the interesting question is, do you believe that? If you believe that, you know, Oprah Winfrey was somebody who started, you know, she was born into poverty to an unwed mother in the rural South of the United States. She had the least opportunity of somebody you'd think would be the first woman billionaire, let alone a woman African-American billionaire. So if you live that belief and you're connecting to something bigger than yourself, what does that bring? This idea of having determination and operate in a feedback as opposed to failure frame. Somebody like Milton Erickson was an incredible genius that way. He could find, you know, ways to work with anything and around anything. And then this idea of think systemically, focus on deep structure. I have here, given our what we were saying about solving crimes, I have Sherlock Holmes, which was Arthur Conan Doyle, but who actually, interestingly, Arthur Conan Doyle created Sherlock Holmes by taking what he learned from a medical school professor about how to diagnose illness and applying it to crimes. So it's actually an interesting example of a strategy. So now, here's the thing. These strategies are kind of the antidotes for these red flags, right? So how do I get out of a problem frame? I imagine what's possible. How do I go towards versus away from? Right? I'm maintaining that focus on the future, and determination and feedback. How do I avoid divisiveness and exclusion? I think systemically. Right? How do I avoid negative identity judgments? Or what do I do about negative identity judgments? The sense of contribution to something bigger. Use multiple perspectives. Move back and forth between, you know, the big picture and little chunks. You know, and then how do we get out of just, you know, getting into this absence of multiple intelligences? I want to engage metaphors and these other things. So one of the things we're going to do is we show how, in order to use these sleight of mouth patterns, there's particular mindset that is going to allow us to organize them in a certain combinations and in a certain way. And in fact, that's what I'd like to I'm going to just go through this quickly for a moment. And then I know I do want to have time for, obviously, our questions, which I think are probably some of the most important part of this. But one example we'll be looking at in the advanced program is somebody like Socrates, who most people know. He developed what's called the Socratic method, which is a philosophical inquiry, essentially into beliefs. And as it says here, It's a dialectical method of inquiry. Dialectical method means, there's question, answer, you're going back and forth. And it uses questions to clarify and unpack beliefs and to understand the assumptions and the evidences used to support those beliefs, and important, to expose any contradictions or inconsistencies or fallacies. This is the essence of critical thinking. And if you think about what goes on a lot in the world today, we see it especially in politics. People they just have a belief, and you believe it, and then you're just going to keep trying to, they call it a cognitive bias, excuse me. I kept thinking cognitive dissonance, but it's cognitive bias. Cognitive bias means I just select, I go on the internet and I only select the things that support my belief. I only remember the things that support that belief. I only look for the things that support that belief. And so there's no examination of it. I'm just trying to keep reinforcing it. As I was reading a report about a recent, they were doing this kind of focus group where they were trying to get people to do this, to look critically at their beliefs. And most of the people said, I didn't come here to learn anything. I didn't come here to listen to somebody else. I came here to be heard, right? I just want my belief to be heard. And so it's interesting. So now here's an example. I'm not going to go into this. There's a lot of examples here. This is just one example of how we diagrammed out one of these dialectic interactions between Socrates and a student. And it's about, in this case, again, it's interesting. It's about justice. What's the purpose of justice? How do you use it in peacetime? And I'm just going to very briefly touch upon this. This is showing that Socrates goes and he gets to try to chunk this down. First, he gets several examples. Well, okay, what is the use of agriculture in peacetime? Well, to grow crops. What about shoemaking, to produce shoes? Well, so what, as a consequence, what does justice produce? What does it make? Oh, well, and here so now you start to get it, a new definition of it. We call it redefine. Well, it's a form of interaction between people. That's what it's useful in business. Oh, then he goes, let's use some other analogies. Who's good at playing chess? A chess player, who's good at building a wall? A bricklayer. Okay, who's good at music? A musician. So what's a just person good for? So now it's very interesting. You go from justice to a just person. So anyway, you get the idea that this is not just kind of a reacting. Here, you're getting multiple examples. And now the way we would map this, and one of the things we do in the program here, is that we would start to put this into a structure. As it says here, what's the belief you want to explore? What are some concrete analogies for that? What are the effects? What are some other analogies for the effects of that? What are the consequences of these analogies? And drawing from these analogies, how might you restate this belief in a different way or in a more precise way? So that would be an example of the kind of things we do. Now, of course, what we do in this program is, as we did in the basic program, you're always going to be working with beliefs that are relevant to you, your own beliefs, or beliefs that of others that you are, working with or confronting. We do the same thing. This is just a second example. I'm not going to go into it in the same level of detail. You might remember, those of you who were in the first Sleight of Mouth program, we went over some examples from Lincoln. We're going to add some more examples here. Abraham Lincoln, and how he was trying to transform this view that somehow slavery was okay for some people. And so what we'll do there is we'll take the way he did it about slavery, but we're not so much interested per se in slavery. What we're interested in is, so what did he do? What kind of strategy did he use in order to transform people's perceptions of that? How could we use that same strategy? Now here we see we're using something slightly different than Socrates did. You are using an analogy, but then you're also using that to make a counterexample. So you see some overlaps to what Socrates was doing, but then there's also some differences. Now, again, these are the things we'll go into in much more depth in the program. We go into the famous scene from Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where Mark Antony turns the crowd around. He turns the crowd from being against him to being for him, and with about 200 words. I mean, it's fictional, but you get the sense of how you can feel that is actually plausible. You can do this. And here he uses things like a series of counterexamples rather than a series of analogies or something. We also, from Shakespeare, there's a famous scene from Henry V where Henry V is his troops are outnumbered 5-1. And so they're looking at this thing, looking like there's no way that we can win this. And he convinces them to go and do this, where they have this, they rallies them, as it says, to an improbable victory. How did he do that? Ghandi did sort of the opposite direction. Instead of getting people to go into a war, he got people to not fight. What did he do? He, of course, in doing so, he created a whole other movement that affected generations since then, of nonviolent, protests and so on and so forth. And then this idea of Oprah Winfrey, I was talking about her belief, in this belief that if you do what you love, if you work hard and offer it in service to others, the universe will support you to succeed. Well, the opposite of that would be, you can't succeed because you're the wrong color, you're the wrong gender, you came the wrong size, you came from the wrong background, etc. So how do we, again, connect to something that allows us to, again, examine beliefs, choose beliefs that are actually going to be the ones that are much more likely to create a purposeful, successful, meaningful life for ourselves and for others. So that's what we want to really we do in the program. And again, in the masterclass here, I wanted to just give you again this idea that, so you have these sleight of mouth patterns, but in order to really get the most out of knowing those patterns, you need to know how to use them strategically. We need to know, okay, if I do, it's not just I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that and sort of do it by trial and error, what sometimes you might call trial and horror, right? I actually know that I want to get here. That's where some of the strategies of genius comes in. What kinds of things am I going to need to do to get there? And again, as we said in the beginning Sleight of Mouth program, Sleight of Mouth is always about mindset. Think before you speak. And what do people who have made transformations in their own lives and in the lives of others and in the world, how do they do that? And then how do they then engage language to support that, to create that? So again, this idea that we combine these red flags with these Polya patterns of inference, which we would say are essentially strategies for how do you build or challenge beliefs, and then these patterns of genius. So that's our Advanced Sleight of Mouth program, 4 days in October, the 5th and 6th, the 12th and 13th. As always, I'm just, as I get ready to pass this back to Oksana and Richard to both say a little bit more about the program, but also to be our question selectors. They've done an amazing job with this 7007.info. I mean, anything you want to know, go there. Except there might be some things that Oksana and Richard want to share with you before that are some additional surprises. So I'm going to pass it to them now, and we'll get a little bit more information, do some Q&A, and I'm looking forward to hearing those questions. So welcome back, Oksana and Richard.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert.
It's such a symphony of ideas. It just I have this amazing synesthesia where I just like it's hearing music or something. It's just amazing. What a pleasure. We do have a couple of questions, and
more will come. Sometimes questions when people hear them, it brings other ones.
Yeah, that's it. We invited their questions, and I think that the first question here is kind of interesting. It's from Greg Schweitzer, I'm curious about the gap, if any, between what people believe and what they want to believe.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Williamson quote that playing small is not ideal may not seem true in a person's life, but they want it to be true and defend it heartily.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, thank you. That was Greg?
Sorry, yes.
Greg. Thank you, Greg. So first of all, there is a huge gap between what people believe and what they want to believe. I mean, that's in fact one of the main things that we also will be working with, because there's a big difference between wanting to believe something and believing it. And this is a big part of what Sleight of Mouth is all about. Of course, people want to believe that, I can shine my light. Of course, people want to believe that I can become healthy again, but that doesn't mean I do believe it. One of my favorite parts from, I did a lot of looking at, was talking about Jesus as an example. I grew up Catholic, so I had a lot of exposure to especially the Gospels of the New Testament. And I've been working, one of my future books that I've done a lot of work on is the healing patterns of Jesus. But one of my favorite quotes is, Jesus says to some guy, he says, yes, all is possible. So if you believe, all is possible for those who believe. And this guy says back to him, yes, Lord, I believe, help me in my disbelief. So yeah, meaning, of course, I want to believe that, but doesn't mean I do. And that's why we've got to find, this is the whole notion of a thought virus, right? The thought virus, big part of it is that it's typically not necessarily conscious, and it is not necessarily my belief, right? I want to believe that I'm intelligent. I want to believe that I don't have to play small. But there is someone else in there that says, watch out. I mean, you have all of these cultural beliefs. They say, the nail that's up the highest is going to get hit the first. There's an analogy, or the tallest poppy is cut first. So you better play small, or, you're going to be killed. Right? So yeah, I want to serve the world, but I also don't want to be hurt. So now I've got what I want to believe, and I also have what I do believe. If I don't play small, I'm gonna be harmed. If I don't play small, but if I play small, I'm never going to make a difference. So these are the kinds of things that we want to be able to pull out and then examine through these strategies. So absolutely, the key is the big difference, big gap often, and for some people, of course, the gap is bigger or smaller between what I want to believe, what I do believe.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
Thank you. Here's a question from, I believe it's U4 Learning. And maybe it's a comment, but I'll read it as we got it.
Sure.
Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, sometimes we can comment on comments or elaborate. Yeah, so comments are also good.
I know there's a question at the end here. So, Robert, social media algorithms also support the biases.
Yes.
I wonder how ideas like democracy or religion got adopted at such a large scale, or on such a large scale, and what could be done for something like NLP so it became adopted on a large scale, became a way of life for the masses.
Yeah. Well, so again, I think, thank you for that comment question, because I think this is where things like strategies of genius come in, right? The patterns of genius. And again, if we model, this is, everything in NLP, all the good stuff in NLP, of course, comes from modeling, and Sleight of Mouth is no exception. So we say, well, let's model how that happened. How did somebody take something that has become that becomes ubiquitous? And I think part of it is, of course, finding the different channels of communication. And social media is, it's interesting, and also brings up another interesting point here, because one of the things we also go over in terms of the principles of sleight of mouth and the idea of multiple intelligences is that you've got what we call persuasion. It goes all the way back to Aristotle, where he said he talked about logos, pathos, ethos. Logos means it appeals to my head, right? That's one form of belief. I believe it in my head, but I don't believe it in my heart. That would be pathos. Pathos is about, emotion. touching the heart. And then ethos is about touching the whole person. So once again, you've got interesting things. I was remembering recently this interesting quote. I think it was from Margaret Thatcher, who said, Europe was created by history. Europe is based on history. The United States, America, is based on philosophy because it didn't have a history. And it's kind of interesting. What's the difference that makes that difference? Do I believe that all people are created equal? What does that mean? So if you take things like what does democracy mean? It's interesting. In my own situation in the United States, it's kind of like both parties are saying the other parties is ruining democracy. It's like, okay, what does that mean? So first of all, I think this is this idea of what we would call a field, and how do we influence a field? And sometimes, and again, this is the positive aspect of a virus, right? When we say something goes viral, what makes it go viral? It's rather interesting to look at the kinds of things on social media that go viral and which ones don't, and what kinds of language they use. And so this would be, so one of the things I would suggest, I'm not sure if I'm really addressing the question directly, but I would go and say, let's model what goes viral, on the internet these days. What kinds of things do that? Now, how can I then leverage that with right type of language that's going to lead in these directions of what I can imagine through these patterns of genius? So I don't know if I'm really, that's kind of more of a comment on the comment, I suppose, than a direct answer. But
well, that's fair, I think.
Okay.
And obviously there's a lot of interest in this, Robert. Oksana?
Yeah, Oksana.
First of all, I would like to thank you for this interesting masterclass, and I would like to attract your attention, our dear viewers, to our upcoming new program. And we have question like from Prakash. Hi, Prakash. Can I do this course if I have not done the first course? Maybe Richard can explain.
Yes, yes. Of course, I think, Prakash, you can understand that this advanced workshop is going to presuppose knowledge of the original model, which Robert taught this last, when, in February?
In February.
In February.
And we recommend familiarizing yourself with this. In fact, we're going to make it very, very inexpensive to do so. So we welcome your interest, and we like to support your ability to get the original model too. That if you choose, you're welcome to just take the second course by itself, and I think that would be a great way to start. Then you can go back later if you want to, or you can read the book, The Original Sleight of Mouth, which was at least part of the foundation of the first workshop. So yes,
yeah,
you can.
I think Richard, what I might just add is that you need to take responsibility. You'll get, if you're prepared, you'll get more out of it. And we're not going to slow down for people that are not, who haven't had the first. We're going to just assume these things. I will, it's not like we're going to just, we are going to, of course, go over some of the patterns. As we go over them, as we will talk about them, we will be defining them, but you'll get much more out of it if you have some access. And of course, because the first class was recorded, and I think this is something that you guys will address as well, is that you can also get access to that as a package with this. So
yes, and for 1/3 of the price. In other words, and Robert, it's not only the comprehensive videos, it also is all of the slides, all of the written materials, and all of the gifts. So it's a pretty big and comprehensive package.
So let me just summarize it. If you want to do the whole Sleight of Mouth program, including the first part, the basic one and also an advanced one to join us in October, you have a possibility to buy this package on 7007.info with a discount. If you just join to our program, it's going to be a discount. So just go to this website and
Can I give the numbers?
the package.
The live excuse me, the live workshop this fall is right now at the early bird price, $555. It'll be going up to $580 in 3 days. But right now, $555, and you can get this first Sleight of Mouth 1, everything for $300. So the whole everything together right now is $855. Later, later you can buy if you want, you can buy the whole package for the full price of $755. So right now you can get both at a big discount, because we really want you to have access to the original. This is the foundation.
And then because it is a summer is going on, so you can if you buy full package, you have time to review the videos and and join us and enjoy in October the full program. And it's what is important, and I want to emphasize it. In the next 3 days, you can join for the early bird price, and then after 3 days, the price is going raise up. Not very big step, but still it is a significant discount. So we invite you to enjoy. And also, what is very important, we always give a possibility to people who cannot pay the full amount right away. We have a payment plans. So if you go to this website 7007 info and you choose the payment plan option, then you will be able to divide your payment into little amounts.
Yeah.
And pay the whole amount by steps. Because
we agree with Robert. We think this is really, really not only interesting and useful, we think this is, the world really needs this. We believe in this, and we're doing everything possible to, first of all, to produce it, to make it available, accessible, and we're so grateful that Robert is doing this. But also, we want to support you so that you have access to it, and it's as inexpensive as possible, and all the complete materials. We really believe in this, and that's why we're doing it.
And we also would like to invite you to be sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, this new YouTube channel you're watching us, or if you're watching us at the recording, you can see this in the letter or in the description to video. You can see our sources. We have new Instagram channel opened, and also this YouTube channel and Telegram channel about Robert's Sleight of Mouth work and much more. And we have right now really a life going on social media publications, and we publish in shorts almost every 2 days
on the Telegram channel,
on Instagram and also on YouTube. So be sure you're turn on us.
Tuned in.
Tune in. On us.
Tune in, turn on. It's
yeah.
Instead of drop out, it's tune in, turn on, and join us.
And drop in. Yeah.
Drop in.
Drop in, swim with us, and then we are going to have really interesting social media life and connection. And also, if you have any questions, in the description on the video, you will have an email address and also Telegram chat for our technical support. If you have any questions about registration or how to do payment plans and so on, just write to us, and our engineer, technical engineer Z, will be happy to help. We really want you to join us and to be with us on this amazing program.
And I just want to add something else.
Please,
I want to add, Richard, that it's more than a program. The way you guys do this, and it's something I love and I appreciate so much about you, is there's also a community. There's networking. I mean, so if you sign up for this, it's not just a program. You're going to get this whole, a community cultural experience. So it's something that I have really, even I just say that and I feel this tingling all over me. You guys are amazing. So I just want to let everybody know this is a lot more than just a course.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much. Yes, we
It
really
takes a community. It takes a village.
we really have usually a very nice atmosphere and the real community. People are getting acquainted with each other and continuing their interaction even after the program. We have practical free meetings afterwards, and people meeting with Zoom already without us, making exercises together. And what is interesting, we have really international experience, because
Yes.
people who are joining, it's not only people who are native speaking English,
For example,
like me, not native speaking, definitely, but with good heart, and people are getting acquainted from all over the planet,
in fact,
literally, and interacting with each other.
we just had a question in Spanish, Robert, from Grupo Estratégico.
Yes.
In English, they're asking, is this masterclass recorded on the channel? So we can answer that. It's
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, it's recorded, and recording is going to be available even after masterclass finished. And we, by the way, what is very important also, we have those PDF slides which Robert just showed to you. For those of you who register to the masterclass, you will have those slides in your personal accounts, as well as the gifts to this free masterclass.
And what, pray tell, is the gift?
And this is an audio recording from Coach State to Wholeness with Robert's his audio guide, so you can do exercise
That's really cool.
to set yourself into resourceful coach state. And also we have 2 other free webinars in your personal accounts. First one is a Sleight of Mouth introductory, the first webinar, and also Sleight of Mouth book launch.
Book launch, right? When Sleight of Mouth 2
right, the book launch, right.
That was really interesting.
And pretty soon we are also going to publish sets of Robert's interview about Sleight of Mouth, which we've did with him for the last year. And please be sure to subscribe and
Stay tuned.
In order not to skip anything.
Yep, yeah, because you know this is dynamic. This is ongoing, and obviously Robert's creating this. You know, it's an ongoing process. In fact, there's a question here: will there be a Sleight of Mouth 3?
Aha. Good question. There is. Absolutely, there is a Sleight of Mouth 3, and the Sleight of Mouth 3 is a very interesting one, because this is one where we actually have you think, if you had certain which beliefs that if you had them would completely change your life for the better, and which beliefs, if people in the world shared them, would completely change the world. And then we use the Sleight of Mouth to really work on those. So that's an amazing. That was to me, that's my, of course. That's one of my favorites, but it's really about using words to change worlds, to change, starting with ourselves.
Yes.
So
yes.
not only tune in, but stay tuned in.
Yeah.
Stay tuned in.
Yeah, because this is just getting started. This is, of course, you began many years ago, Robert. I believe sometime in the 1980s was the
early 80s.
But then in 1999 you published the Sleight of Mouth 1, and it was a phenomenon. It was a hit, and even now I think it's one of your best-selling books.
I think it is. It's sort of perennially the biggest seller of all the books in pretty much every language too. So not only the English version, but it's in Spanish, it's in Italian, it's in German, it's in French, it's in Chinese. It's actually it's in yeah.
There really is a great interest in this, I suppose, because we're all swimming in a sea of communication, and being able to find, the right word at the right time is a skill that all of us need. Communicate. We have to master communication in order to be able to interact and get our ideas across, to influence ethically. It's all, and to understand other people. So Sleight of Mouth is really a tool, a skill, a model that we all need, and perhaps that's why it was so wildly successful. And I think Sleight of Mouth 2 is going to be also, because this is the this is the next level.
The next level, absolutely.
I think it's also very useful and interested people because it's connected with limited beliefs, the
Yes,
thought viruses and the way to transform, and also to transform limited beliefs, and also to increase, to fertilize the positive beliefs. That's
yes.
what we're also doing on this going to do on this program. And probably one more question is, if you have time, Robert, is it in when we are going to do exercises on this sleight of
Right.
mouth, what kind of approaches are combined in order to do exercise? What
Right.
what are the methodical layout for them?
Yeah, so thank you. I mean, Oksana, because we will do a lot of times we start with some self exercises. So we kind of do things, with ourselves. We will then do demonstrations of each of these strategies. Then we also walk through, and the idea when I say walk through, I mean literally, because we're engaging multiple intelligence. So this is not just a bunch of this is not going to just be about a bunch of words and language. And that's why we say being a native English speaker is not necessarily that significant, because the words themselves, the meaning of those words are coming from something beyond the words, something other than the words. And that's the kind of thing we're engaging. We're engaging the mindset that goes with these. And so, and then, we will do, you have the opportunity to do, usually we do some self exercises, a demo, guided exercise, and then people also have a chance to go to breakouts and do some practice.
And these patterns are translingual. It's not directly limited to English by any means. So,
Exactly.
So there's.
Thank you very much.
I guess, Robert, I don't want to take too much of your time. You're very gracious. There's a couple more questions.
Sure.
One is if you choose. The person asks, what is your identity and belief? What is hold on just a second. What is your identity and purpose?
Well, so thank you. That's a great question, and kind of it's taking off from the Marianne Williamson quote, where she said, "If you shine your light, it unconsciously gives permission for others to do the same." I always like to use my primary metaphor for my identity is something like a candle. And I think it was Buddha who said that, from a single candle, you could light 1,000 other candles without yours diminishing at all, any more than it would naturally. If I just light my candle, I light no other candles, it's going to go down the same as if I light 1,000 other candles. Lighting another candle does not take anything away from mine. So I kind of see myself as this kind of a flame, and the flame certainly brings light, but it also brings other things, right? A flame brings energy, it brings warmth. And when you say, what's my purpose? My purpose is to light these other candles, which means I want to, inspire others to also, like Marianne Williamson was saying, be who they can fully, be a light in this world. We need more light. There's a lot of darkness right now. And so that darkness doesn't need more, more obstacles, more blocks to the light. It needs more light. So I would say that would be my metaphorical answer.
Well, I think it's all metaphor, isn't it?
Yes.
And maybe perhaps the last question, what are the sources from which you synthesized this new workshop? So the person says, I heard strategies of genius, Polya patterns, but it's
well, there's if you think about this, a lot of NLP, there's a lot of generative change in it as well. Basically, we're weaving together foundations of NLP. If you think about some of the principles and the skills, there's a lot of NLP, pacing and leading, getting rapport, etc. So I mean, it has, I think, those foundations. If you think of some of the red flags are sort of related to what we call in NLP well-formed outcomes. So it's really a weaving together of many of these foundations. NLP, generative change, the Polya patterns, the strategies of genius.
Well, strategy of genius, that's also NLP, right? This is modeling.
Yes.
Essentially. So,
And there's a little bit, of course, too, of some of the success factor modeling in here as well, which is kind of a source of, you know, how do you you know, find, you know, have a vision, a sense of passion, vision, mission, ambition. So we're kind of weaving in some of that as well.
So it's going to be also a connection with the famous Dilts pyramid, right?
Of course, yes. Logical levels pyramid is foundational there. And we're going to be doing a whole program just on that at some point in English, I'm sure.
Yes.
yep, definitely
And we
stay
are very
tuned, guys.
much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Robert, for being
You're so
invited to
welcome.
the world. It's so nice to be with you just here on this webinar, and we are so much looking forward to the whole program this upcoming October.
Me too. Yes, yes, yes.
Indeed.
If someone says my purpose, this is what I'm here to do. This is what I'm here for. And it's to work with you, who also, there's that you know, we say alignment at the pyramid, alignment to the very top of the pyramid.
To the very top.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure and an honor, Robert. We respect your work so deeply. So
thank you very much, Robert.
Okay, and everybody, hope to see you at the October.
We'll be in touch. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Join us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good
Bonsoir.
night. Bonsoir. Arrivederci.
Yeah, wait.